welcome. This is Navigating the Maze for all of those of you who are interested in selling your products to government. My name is Carolyn Lawson. I am the Chief Information Officer of the California Public Utilities Commission. And I'm going to give you a real brief primer here of how government is structured. I am one of several CIOs in the state of California. So every department, virtually every agency within the state of California has a CIO, which is just like me. We also have a state CIO who sits at the cabinet level. All of us CIOs at the agency level have a dotted line reporting relationship up to the state CIO. And I'd like to introduce Adrian Farley, who is the Chief Deputy Director of our state CIO's office. I brought him here today so that we could have a conversation that goes beyond just one entity, being the Public Utilities Commission, and talk about government in general, what's going on at the state CIO level, what our state CIO sees for the future, and the types of opportunities that are available in a broader range. So, Adrian?
Thank you all for being here today. We're excited to talk about the opportunities that exist, and we really want to engage you to find out what's next, to find out what we haven't thought of yet, and how we can connect the products and services that you're developing now and in the future to our business needs. So I first want to talk, just kind of frame up our discussion and provide a map for what we'll be talking about. First, we want to talk about the size of the market. Then we're going to talk about really the trends that we see and what the priorities are. And then we'll look at both opportunities, and then we'll give you some context around the resources that we see as being available. And I'm making my microphone work properly now. So I'm going to talk about both the size of the state marketplace nationwide, the federal marketplace, as well as the state of California market. So right now, state and local governments spend about $60 billion on an annual basis on IT. And this number does not include their own personnel, but it includes both new projects as well as maintenance and operations of existing technology systems. The state of California spends more than $2 billion on an annual basis on technology projects and technology activities. In addition, we spend a little over $1 billion on the state's permanent IT workforce. We expect that by the year 2011 that this amount will go to about $75 billion. It's important to note that a lot of this expenditure is about integrated IT projects that do things like eligibility processing, case management, enterprise resource planning. That's where the majority of these resources are focused, and they typically it's within the system integration space. Right now, the federal government spends about $66 billion on an annual basis on IT, and this is split almost evenly between the civilian agencies and the Defense Department. In addition, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act includes billions of dollars, $21 billion, for example, for health information technology, $7 billion for broadband, but it's not purely connectivity or expanded access. There are also billions of dollars available within the Recovery Act for specific applications within the broadband space, applications related to education data, and that's one area that we'd like to focus on today because that's a clear point of entry as it relates to Web 2.0 technologies, especially business intelligence and data analysis Web 2.0 applications. By the year 2011, we expect that the federal government space will account for about $80 billion in spending on IT. governments are already leveraging Web 2.0 technologies, but they're really not purchasing them at this point, outside of a few isolated examples. For example, what we're focused on now is, using essentially free applications, not putting too much information in those contexts, and but it's a place where we use things like Flickr and Facebook and RSS feeds and wikis and blogs and that kind of technology. But we haven't really unlocked the true potential of connecting to citizens and to other stakeholders to draw out from them what, and engage them really in the market. It's been primarily, we've used it as a push tool, which isn't really any different than traditional web. The federal government, specifically the Center for Disease Control, has been pretty innovative around using social tools to engage the public around issues of public health, user-generated content to engage people of different communities who, typically government does not engage with, anyone younger than 40 in a very coherent way. So we see that some government agencies have, get it, and they're starting to use the tools in an engaging way, but there's still a long way to go. To kind of frame up this discussion, I think it's important for you to know what state agency CIOs and state CIOs across the country see as their top priorities. First, there are a lot of policy priorities, and there are also a lot of technology priorities. Web 2.0, as you'll see on the next slide, is a technology priority. And the opportunity for you, really, is to connect Web 2.0 to these policy priorities and help state CIOs and federal CIOs really drive the implementation of these tools. Consolidation and centralization is an ongoing topic. It's something that we're focused on right now in the state of California. We're working through a proposal that would consolidate the state's major data centers, the information security function, as well as a very large public safety radio function within the office of the state CIO. But there are also ongoing initiatives within departments and agencies in state government and across the country related to things like server virtualization, things related to server consolidation, storage consolidation. So there are a lot of hardware as well as software activities related to consolidation. Also around, I'll just walk through a few of these, shared services. Web 2.0 is a really strong platform, at least in my mind, around shared services in a way of sharing data within government and a way of also opening up government to people. So that's something that, to the extent that you can connect your technologies to these kinds of business priorities, and so you all know this PowerPoint deck will be on the web so you guys can take a look at it. These are what state CIOs across the country have identified as technology priorities. As you'll see, number 5 is Web 2.0, and that's services and collaboration, as well as really social computing. One area of social computing that we're working on right now is code reuse and how we can engage across the state enterprise to reuse code. So any way that you can connect to that kind of a priority, it's a strong business case that individual departments and agencies can then sell and get funded. Just from the state's perspective, these are kind of the strategic priorities that we've set out. It's nothing earth-shattering. It's probably the same across the country. But part of selling to the public sector is understanding the nomenclature with which people talk about technology. And the extent to which you're familiar with the way they're framing issues makes you seem like somebody that really cares about what they're doing. Whether you do or not, it doesn't matter. Hopefully you do. But to the extent that you speak in the same words and that you understand what they're talking about and understand really what their pain points are, you'll really, you'll ingratiate yourself more or less, and you'll make them spend the time and energy in their busy days. I mean, everyone within government is overworked and underpaid, generally speaking. And to the extent that you go to the table, understanding what they're talking about, what's important to them, rather than selling into a black hole, you'll do a lot better. This is just briefly what our investment focus is. So we have $2 billion a year. Probably about $1.5 billion of that comes through my office every year, and we review those expenditures. But individual departments and agencies have a strong degree of autonomy as to how they spend their IT dollars. So there's about $500 million that they just control directly, and that's a significant pot of money. So this is kind of a frame of what some of the opportunities are. I'll focus on those at the bottom because you can all read, but really around opportunities to connect social tools through GIS, business intelligence, and business analytics and data warehousing. Those are some very important opportunities. We've got about 78 projects in the state focused on the 6 issues on the bottom. Transaction processing, content management, case management, those are important, and we're beginning to look at how we can integrate social tools within the context of search. You know, many of you have probably looked at or heard of the new way that ESPN is doing search. You can't, anything you want, you can find just by using how you interpret the information. So that's one thing that we're working to implement within the state, because we want there to be no wrong door for citizens. This really is back to the point of how you frame your solution within the context of what state CIOs feel is important. It's really, that's a critical step. Also, knowing where their pain points are, that's going to open doors, and then being able to answer their questions about reliability, security, privacy, those are important issues too. Also saving money. Here are some resources that we want to make available to you, and all these websites provide information about individual states through the NASCIO website, which is the National Association of State CIOs. You'll be able to get individuals' information about all the different states, as well as many cities. Through our website, you can look at things like our strategic plan, what our policies are around different technology standards, enterprise architecture, as well as business opportunities. And then I've also listed out different web links that you can connect to specific contract opportunities, and you can search those because these are updated all the time. So rather than link to specific opportunities, you can go to these websites. They all have pretty robust search functions. Also, I'm going to turn it back over to Carolyn to talk about some of the opportunities as it relates to businesses, to small businesses, micro businesses, as well as those that are run by disabled veterans.
Okay, so what this means to me, this is what the information and the instruction that I get from the state CIO's office, and then to break it down on an individual agency level. All of those goals and objectives that they have, I have to perform against those. We meet often, we have a lot of reporting that goes on, and everything that I do inside of my organization has to align with that strategic plan of the state, has to align with those goals and objectives. And to the extent that you approach me and say, I understand that you're trying to meet this particular goal, or that in the strategic plan this kind of thing is outlined and I have a tool that will help you do that, that's great. That's somebody that I will talk to. To the extent that you come to me and say, I have this great widget, it does these cool things, then I start backing off. And if I'm approached as I'm normally approached, which is, so tell me what keeps you up at night. You know, I'm going the other way. Because, as Adrian said, we are underpaid and overworked. We have very aggressive goals as a state. The purpose for what we do in IT is to meet the public need. We don't have time to mess around with tools and toys and things that are not exactly what meets the public need. So my focus as an agency CIO is on the things that my state CIO is focusing on. Now I'd like to, if we can we get to the DGS website, do you think?
Yeah, I'll go to it.
We're doing a little ad hoc thing here. Department of General Services, dgs.ca.gov. You're going to want to remember that. Whenever I go to procure something, I check on the DGS website to see if, for example, you are registered as a small business. If you're registered as a small business, you're very easy for me to buy from. If you're registered under what's called the leveraged procurement agreements, and we'll talk about what some of those are, you're also easy for me to buy from. If you're not, then there are all kinds of hoops that I have to go through. And I know to a lot of folks that sounds like bureaucracy, but it's really not.
It is.
Well, it is, but it's not. Yeah, helping. No. The purpose of bureaucracy, the intent, even if it doesn't end up accomplishing this, is checks and balances. So the purpose of the leveraged procurement agreements is so that there is one set of terms and conditions across the state. So it's very important that you engage in what's called CMAS, the California Multiple Award Schedule. We'll show you how to get there. It's very important that you engage if you are a small business and register as a small business. I have in an agency what's called a delegation. That delegation is the amount of money I can spend without having to go through a much more arduous process. So with my delegation, on 2 or 3 bids, I can procure a product or procure a service. If you are not a small business, if you're not one of the leveraged purchasing, part of those leveraged purchasing agreements, then I have to go through what's called an extended procurement process, where we do the request for proposal, the proposals come back, there's questions, reviews. A lot of that extended procurement process can take up to 18 months. Now, 18 months doesn't always work for small businesses, and it doesn't always work for me either. Some of the larger projects, we have to do that because of the amount of money that we're spending. But if you really want to sell to the state, really want to sell to government, get yourself registered as a small business. If you take a look, there's the CMAS, the acronym list. There are ways to sign up and get involved. Learning the terminology is going to be very, very important. I want to show you how to get here. Can you just go to the DGS homepage? Do the DGS. This is the Procurement Division homepage. This is the one you can never find. Okay. So you would think that as you scroll down, there's boxes down below, and it says doing business with the state. And you would think that there would be really quick links there, right? That is not the easy way to get there. I did not design this site. Go up to how do I, and then there's something, and I can't see it from here, but it says doing business, selling to the state or doing business with the state. That's how you get there. As soon as you do that,
I've given you the direct link in the PowerPoint. So.
Yeah, he did give you the direct link in the PowerPoint. That PowerPoint is gold to you, by the way. I know that your eyes probably glazed over when we were talking about all the policy stuff. That is gold. Those policy issues, really, they're my guides. That's where I'm trying to move my organization toward. Once you get here, then you can register as a small business. See where it says SBDVBE, Small Business Disabled Veterans, in the gray bar on the side? That's something you're going to need to do. You're going to need to sign up for the California Multiple Awards Schedule. That is an approval process that you go through. You give information about your organization. You choose the categories that you function in. There are terms and conditions which you read and agree to. Your package gets reviewed by the analyst. Once you get approval, then you can bid on any CMAS contract. And so that acronym means CMAS. When you're talking to people like me, we're going to ask you, are you CMAS? If you're not, then I'm looking at an 18-month procurement, even if it's $10,000. So you're much less likely to be included in those kinds of procurements if you're not CMAS or you're not a small business. There's another one called MSA, Master Services Agreement. That's a similar process to CMAS. There are forms that you fill out, references for your business, descriptions about what you do. You really want to get on an MSA list. I want to warn you, the CMAS and the MSA processes are long processes. You can get discouraged going through it. Don't get discouraged. It's very important to us. And as I've been traveling around through like the halls the last couple days, people have found out I'm from government and have kind of wondered what I'm doing here. We want what you have. We need your innovation. We need the way that you look at things, which is different than the way we look at things. We need you to take a good look at those policy initiatives and those, the strategic plan from the state CIO's office. I need you to tell me how I reach those goals, because you're seeing things from a different perspective than I am. So have we gotten you sufficiently confused?
And just to provide a little more detail on some of the different contracting opportunities, the small business process, all that requires the department to do, it's for any contract that's under $100,000, they can just go to 2 small businesses and get quotes over the telephone. That's a much simpler process. For the CMAS process, that's any contract under $500,000, and all the department has to do is a simple statement of work, get responses back in terms of cost from bidders. They need at least 2. And this is a very valuable contract vehicle for emerging companies, because local governments throughout California spend billions of dollars on IT, and they leverage these contracts all the time. And so this really gets you into a broad pool of technology purchasers. And then the master service agreements go up to 1.5 million. So those are big pools of resource, and they account for probably 70% of the state's spend on IT. So with that, Carolyn and I would like to turn it open to questions.
We've got a microphone right there, if you'd please step to the microphone.
Cesar Castro with the Institute for the Future. Is any of the procurement system organized by, say, science and technology, education, or is it more sort of across all the different departments and just looking for technologies that can apply in all the different areas, or both, sort of divided in both ways?
You can search, it's typically broken down. You can search either by a specific keyword search for individual procurements. Interestingly, the state's procurement system is a SaaS solution that it's not hosted by the state. So through that solution, you can search either by keyword, by if there's an individual product code representing what you sell, or you can search by the state as a whole, or individual departments.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I'll show you that quickly.
And you have a link to it, right?
Yep.
In your slides. Hi.
Chung Le from RE3 Software. Could you say a little bit more about the opportunity that come from, say, local government like counties, and do they use the same system?
They have different procurement vehicles that they can use, but they prefer to use some of the state approved. For example, the small business and the CMAS, Master Services Agreement to a certain extent. They've got more flexibility than state governments do, or than the federal government does. But mostly because the terms and conditions in CMAS are already negotiated, counties really like that. Any other questions?
So here are some bids in the IT area. These are all the bids for all the state agencies that or local governments. The CSU and UC use the same system, and you could actually, states across the country use the same platform. So it's a good way to see what opportunities are out there.
I'm wondering how the technology priorities and the policy priorities are developed, where those are developed, and what that process is like.
We use bottom-up and a top-down process. We engage line IT workers as well as people that work in the individual program areas. And we also, from the state CIO's office, engage business leaders within state agencies and departments about what or programmatic problems or business problems they have. And we also engage the individual CIOs, and we collaboratively develop the strategic plan.
Hi, my name is Catherine McCracken, and I'm one of those "what am I doing here" people like you. I'm a facilitator and mediator, and I mostly work with public agencies, so I was interested in this track. And it's kind of a piggyback to that gentleman's question. That was one of my questions, how you develop your public engagement goals. And I guess in terms of that issue, what do you see as the areas where people are really clamoring for this from government, and how does it sort of roll out? I mean, there's a lot of excitement, and it's been interesting to hear people's perspectives at this conference, and there seems to be a lot of emphasis on put as much information out there to be available as possible, but because of the kind of work I do, I know that information doesn't always save us or help us make better decisions. So how do we kind of marry that with the fact that the people are always making the decisions and implementing them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think Carolyn can talk about that from the
Thanks.
PUC's perspective, and then I'll provide the state.
Well, when you ask, how do we use all this in the Web 2.0, how would we not? We're changing culturally. We're going from a paper-based society to an e-based society. The PUC is primarily a regulatory organization. We're very interested in how people feel about the decisions. We're very interested in that kind of discussion. We're interested in the impacts of the decisions that the PUC makes on the public. We're interested in knowing things that you see that we don't see. And it used to be you'd write a letter. Very few people are writing letters now. So the information we're getting from the public has been dropping off, and that concerns us. What we really want is public engagement. And that can be on all kinds of different levels. It doesn't have to be a blog or a wiki or a Twitter. It can be on any kind of a level that you can imagine. And what we're really hoping for is some new and creative ways to not only reach out to the public to tell them what we're doing, but get that comment back from the public to find out if we're doing a good job. That's one thing. The other thing that's very important to us is that I can identify right now 30 years of information that's on paper. 30 years of information. We do about 6,000 decisions a year. Every one of those decisions has reams of backup documentation and research. Wouldn't it be cool if that was available? Now, we're trying to figure out how to do that. There's an enormous cost to getting it scanned and getting it up there. But setting that part aside, going forward, we're looking for ways that we can provide the information to the public that you've paid for, so that you can take a look at how we're doing and what we're doing, not necessarily because we're looking for people to be judgmental, but because we're looking for people to use that collective thought that's so valuable. So I think that the Web 2.0 tools that we're talking about, those collaborative kinds of tools, they're huge for my organization. But I will also tell you that if you approach most of the program areas and talk about Web 2.0, as soon as you say that, their eyes are going to glaze over. So what I need from you is I need you to talk about the business objectives and business goals and how this is going to help me connect to the public and help the public connect to me without ever using the Web 2.0 word. If you can do that, we got a conversation.
And from a broad perspective, we, like other states across the country and the federal government are focused on the whole concept of freeing the data. And what we are looking for are ways that the data will become information that can actually drive decisions. And so those tools that exist currently, expensive business intelligence tools, aren't necessarily accessible to the public. And so we're looking for innovative ways of displaying data and analyzing data that can be integrated into our open government data sharing kinds of efforts.
Hi, I'm Brian Sullivan. I'm Civic Evolution. And the question I have is, what is the state's position on the software as a service model? You take it only grudgingly? Do you pursue it actively, or do you want these services to be located inside of your facilities? I did a project with the state of Western Australia, and they were just, really didn't want anybody from the outside doing things, and we can invent it better. And eventually I got paid by an act of a minister who forced them to finish the contract out, but they just really wanted to just keep it inside. So and the kind of stuff I'm doing, I really see it as a service, and trying to package software and support it on other people's systems in other places makes for a much more difficult job for a very small company.
No. I mean, there are obviously pockets of resistance, but those are primarily within, those are people that fear that software as a service means less work for them and means that their career is, going into the sunset. We continually sell to them that their added value is in connecting with the program and business areas and translating their needs to the technology community. So we're building an army of solution architects, and we're not, we're supportive of software as a service, cloud computing, and those kinds of approaches to technology to the extent that they're the right fit for the business problem. But we're agnostic as to whether or not something's hosted in our facility. We've got a goal of reducing our total data center space, which is north of 450,000 square feet, by 50% in the next 4 years. And we have our goal is to reduce the state's total cost of IT by $1.5 billion over the next 5 years. And that is a critical critical path to getting that done, is to not host things necessarily, don't reinvent the wheel, and to the extent that we can go live more quickly rather than tweak and self-develop, it's in our best interest.
And if I can comment on that from a departmental perspective, well, first of all, I think there's a good example that Adrian had mentioned already, that the e-procurement piece, and I've forgotten the name of it already.
This right here.
That right there is SaaS. So what happens inside of a department, in an agency, is there's a great fear, as Adrian was saying, of losing jobs, but more than that, there's the fear of losing control. So if you can show an agency that information, that as a CIO, I am personally responsible for the privacy of that information, if you can show me that it's private, that there isn't going to be that kind of an issue, if you can show me security, if you can show me those areas that really make it make sense for me, and not just approach software as a service, because again, as soon as you get to acronyms, you're going to be pushed away. What I want to see is, how is that going to help me meet the goals and objectives that I have, one of those being the savings over time, and also ensure the privacy and confidentiality of that information, because to me, every record in a database is not a record in a database, it's somebody's life. And so if you can approach it from that same perspective and understand what my responsibilities are and speak to that as you're presenting things like software as a service, I'm all ears.
Hi, Jerry Franklin, independent contractor. Are there, in addition to being formally a small business or registering as a small business, are there any advantages to being a micro business, a minority-owned business, a woman-owned business, a senior-owned business? et cetera?
Yeah, there are advantages to being a micro business, and at the federal level and in some other states, they have preferences for minority and women-owned businesses. California passed a proposition in the 90s called 209, which prohibits any kind of preference based on race or sex. So from that perspective, there are not any minority or women-owned business preferences, but there are also preferences based on the location of your business. If it's in an enterprise zone, there are preferences based on whether or not you're reusing a military facility, and there's another, but and that accounts to about a 5% pricing preference in the bid process. So you could have a bid of $105,000 and it would be equivalent to $100,000.
Thank you.
Could you just define how the state sees a small business and a micro business?
A small business is a company that has gross revenues of under $10 million a year, or $10 million a year or less, or $30 million over a 3-year period. A micro business is $1 million on an annual basis or less in revenue.
I'm actually curious. All states obviously face different challenges, but a lot of states face a lot of similar challenges. And if one state's developing tools for a certain problem, it might make sense for them to kind of share the solutions. Mm-hmm. What kind of, what's in place that might facilitate that with California, other state governments, and possibly even the federal government? Is there anything?
Yeah, and a lot of it is the relationships of the CIOs that we develop across the country. I'm working on matter of fact, we haven't even had a chance to talk about this yet. I'm working on a large project that has to do with rail safety, and we've engaged both the state of Texas and the state of Illinois. And what we're going to be able to do is share components. We're also getting together to create a common data dictionary so that we can share information across the country. And the power of that is we chose to pursue Texas and Illinois because both of those states are major rail traffic states. And between the 3 states, we now represent well over half of the rail traffic in the country. What that does from a policy perspective is it opens up a whole different kind of discussion. We are really aware that cross-state collaboration is something that we need to do. We're also very aware, taking it back to the state of California, and I think Adrian touched on some of this, cross-departmental collaboration, where when one department creates an application that does X, and I need X over here, when I send in my feasibility study to do X, the state CIO's office has the ability to look across the entire organization and said, why don't you go talk to them over there because they've just done that. You might be able to share. So there's very much that kind of mentality going on now.
And then from a state to state and state to federal perspective, we have strong connections through the National Association of State CIOs, both with the new federal CIO, Vivek Kundra, as well as the individual agency and state CIOs in all 50 states. So.
I apologize, I missed the very beginning. Did you start off by showing how we could get a copy of that presentation?
It will be on the website, and if you have a card, you can give it to me afterward, and I'd be happy to email it to you.
On the Web 2.0 event website?
Yeah,
okay.
Well, it will be posted on that site.
Okay. And my other question was for the, is it the CMAS process? What's in a sort of the best case, what's the time frame to get through that process of approval? And secondly, are you able to submit any kind of bids during that process that would help you do that?
The best case scenario, before I was in the job that I'm in now, I ran the state's procurement organization. Mm-hmm. And when I was there, it took 15 days maximum, or I was, cracking the whip. So it's now about 30 days or so. Sometimes that's an average, but sometimes it can take up to 60 days. to provide some more kind of detail, it's based on GSA, which is the federal government's pricing schedule. So you need to find a GSA pricing schedule that aligns with the product or service that you're offering. And once you have that information, it's also about how thoroughly you complete the form. These people are not going to fill out the form for you, unfortunately. So to the extent that you are thorough in filling out your application, provide all the requested information, it can happen quickly. To the extent that you're not thorough and you don't provide all the needed information, they'll send your information back to you with a highlighter and say, send in this information, and then the process starts all over again. So thoroughness is key.
And there's no, in the course of applying, there's no way you can bid on any work until you get that application done? Is that
yeah, you have to be an approved CMAS vendor before you can bid on that particular kind of work. The small business thing, if you meet that threshold, you can start doing business immediately.
And the small business is 10 minutes on the website.
Okay.
So that's the easiest way to go. That if I were a business, I would do the small business first. I get all the CMAS, I do that, and then I'd go for the MSA.
Is it published, the sort of spending authority? You alluded to a certain spending authority at different levels in the organization.
Yeah, I can check. I'll pull that up.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Danny Macco. Is there any restrictions on companies where it's a U.S. company representing another company that's outside of the country? What's the criteria for, do you have to be incorporated within the U.S. to be able to put these bids in place? Can you talk around that issue?
The only requirement is that you're not a company that has incorporated in a place like Bermuda for purposes of evading either state or federal taxes. So the state does business with multinational corporations and locally based companies representing multinational corporations, but we don't look very fondly on companies that basically do tax swaps into foreign countries to avoid taxes. You can just go to the CIO's website. It's the second one on the list.
It's easy to remember, cio.ca.gov.
You mentioned the Recovery Act and the Health IT initiatives.
Right.
Where can we find out more information about that, and also how can technology companies can participate and help you with maybe help solving some of the technical problems?
The state has a website that I'll pull up. It's recovery.ca.gov, and the federal government has a website, recovery.gov, through which there are links to specific information. I'll pull up the state site.
We're getting there.
So this site has links to all of the federal agencies that have announced specific details about the Recovery Act. This, for example, is the NTIA, which is in the Federal Department of Commerce, and all of the programs as it relates to broadband. And this is the area where there's funding available for web applications also. In addition, under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services there's about 21 billion for health information technology. They're still in the process of developing the regulations around that, but you know, to the extent that you're interested in shaping the regulations and the federal rulemaking process, you can engage online for that. So just on this website or recovery.gov.
Is it common practice or prohibited practice for people such as yourselves or the people in your departments to work with potential vendors? Let's say I've got some solution that, you know, without using all those buzzwords, makes you think this might actually really help me. Is there sort of this brick wall, firewall between us trying to define that as in the best possible way so that not only is it really solving your problem, but it's making it easier for me to get the contract?
Yeah, that'd be
hard.
Not so good.
Yeah.
Unless you're the only company in the universe that can do whatever solution you're talking about, we have a process if there's no alternate available to, but we have a competitive process because we're spending all of your money.
I guess I didn't want to, after I said it, making it easier to get the contract sounds bad. What I meant
yeah, you just about made me want to hide under the table.
Was that, especially if you're new to this, like I would be new to trying to work this out, and same thing again I had in Australia, there's sort of a give and take to figure out how do you put this in the right terminology, you know, so that it's really addressing the needs, that I'm not leaving out data, not that you're trying to, you know, grease the rails so I can actually get the contract, but simply making sure that I'm putting my best foot forward.
Well, from an individual department perspective, there are a lot of people who try to grease the rails. And so one of my roles as a public servant is to make sure that I serve the public good, which means there's no greasing of rails. And personally, I'm probably more stringent than the rules require. The way that I find out about new technologies are places like this. I love coming to these shows and walking around and talking, and because what that allows is the same access to me from every booth. What I have to be careful of is making sure that one vendor does not have more access to me than another. As a CIO, for example, I don't take private appointments in my office. What I may do, though, if I'm looking into a particular area, GIS is an area that we did this in last year, is I put out a request for information, an RFI, out to everyone who had the particular types of things I was looking at on the CMAS list, and asked them to come, and we did a vendor fair. So they were all there for the same period of time, at the same time. We gave them space to set up so that my staff could walk around and see what kinds of things were available. Then after that, we wrote our scope of work based upon what we had seen and what we can do. But it's very important. You're going to have a difficult time with government CIOs if you want to kind of corner them and just try to talk to them specifically. And I've also had a situation just recently where there was a program area, not inside technology. They were looking for a particular type of technology without going through us. They worked with a particular vendor. That vendor helped them write their request for proposal. And I had to put the kibosh on that and said, no, that's not happening. And then what I had to do is we rewrote the request for proposal. I got my project management office involved. We started the process completely over again, set aside all the language that had been used before, and then I had to bar that other vendor from bidding. It's not a real comfortable situation, but that's the extent that we will go to make sure that the competition is fair and open.
And from a statewide perspective, we frequently have vendor workshops that are general in nature, and then we have specific workshops around segments of architecture. So that's how we find out about new and emerging products, and we use a broad and open process, whether it's, and then we typically webcast those events so that all the CIOs throughout the state can see that.
And regardless of what it sounds like, we're not trying to keep you out. What we're trying to do is ensure that it's a level playing field. Because at the end of the day, we're accountable to the public for every dollar that we spend. So, those vendors who really respect that and understand that will show up at the vendor fairs, will continue to send information even though you may not get a response, will pay attention to the types of conferences that government folks go to, will keep an eye on the goals and objectives and strategic the strategic goals that we have, and I'm kind of stumbling here a little bit, but and be able to speak fluently in those terms. It takes a little while to kind of integrate in. Don't be discouraged by that, because there are several hundred counterparts to me that really want to find new and innovative ways to accomplish what we need to accomplish, but we don't want to cross any lines. So if we're standing back a little bit, it's not personal. It's not because we don't want to engage with the whole 2.0 or collaborative space. It's because we really want to be appropriate as we do that. We're about out of time.
Great.
Do we have one last question? Okay, come on up. Then we got to go.
We've been talking about, my name's Emily Weisensee, and I'm representing a graphic design software, a paint software that might be great for the schools, and we've had some inquiries from prisons and rehab centers. Is there a schedule of vendor fairs, or is it vendor fairs for people that have already specifically bid on projects?
No, we don't do vendor fairs based on people that are already doing with the space, doing business with the state in a particular space. We do broadly defined fairs around segments of architecture. So I think what the specific application that you're selling would be specific to education, or as you say, the correction space, and I'd recommend that you go to the state's CIO's website, and we have information about how you can get in contact with those individual agencies and at least send them information about the product that you offer.
Okay, well, I asked from my perspective, but also just for everyone in the room, which just might be curious about whether there's vendor fair schedules.
Yeah, there's one scheduled for Monday. It's a general schedule. It will be streamed live on the CIO's website.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
So we'll take one
I just had one quick question. Have you ever heard of government technology conferences?
Yes.
Okay. I represent government technology conferences. I'm actually an art director. But I'd just like to bring it up, as all of you people with software and different projects, that's a great place to showcase your solutions. Not only do they target education, GIS, mobile communications, geospatial, I mean, all different kinds of topics. And you can connect with state and local government agencies all across the country. And then we also have Public CIO magazine, has different summits, leadership summits. So if you go to govtech.com/events, there's a list of all the different events that you can attend that might pertain to your particular software need.
All right.
So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you very much. I hope you got something out of this.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.